Tommy's story resonated throughout the first responder community. He began speaking at conferences, not about heroism or recovery, but about service in unexpected places and finding purpose in the darkest moments. I spent 3 years thinking I'd lost everything, he would say. My job, my family, my identity, my home. But I hadn't lost the thing that mattered most, the ability to help others. It just looked different than I expected. The Denver program became a model for other cities. Phoenix started a street medicine unit. Seattle developed a homeless outreach response team. Portland created a program pairing former first responders dealing with PTSD with social service agencies. Tommy consulted on all of them, helping cities understand that sometimes the people who seem most broken are actually the most equipped to handle society's hardest problems. Lisa Rodriguez, the social worker who had tried for months to help Tommy, now worked alongside him in the street medicine program. I always knew there was something different about him, she said. I just never understood that his refusal to accept help wasn't stubbornness. It was because he was too busy helping others. 3 years after the river rescue that changed everything, Tommy Mitchell still walks Denver's streets every night. But now he's not alone. He leads a team of 6 other former first responders, all dealing with their own forms of PTSD, all finding purpose in serving the forgotten. They call themselves the Night Watch, and their reputation on the streets is legendary. Homeless individuals know that if you're in trouble, if you're hurt, if you're dying, you call for Tommy's team. They'll come, no questions asked, no judgment rendered, no bureaucracy navigated. The homeless community has its own communication network, and word spreads quickly when Tommy's team makes their rounds. The angels are out tonight, people will say, knowing that help is available even in the darkest corners of the city. Tommy keeps a photo in his wallet, not of his firefighting days, but of the 17 people whose lives he saved during his years under the bridge. Some were overdoses, some were assaults, some were simply people who had given up hope until someone showed them they mattered. People think I fell as far as a person can fall, Tommy reflects, living under a bridge, digging through dumpsters, forgotten by society. But the truth is, I found something under that bridge that I'd never found in 20 years as a fire captain. I found out who I really was when everything else was stripped away. Thomas Mitchell's story challenges everything we think we know about heroism, service, and redemption. For 3 years, he served his community more completely than most people serve in a lifetime, and he did it while society considered him worthless. His story teaches us that service doesn't require a uniform. Heroism doesn't need recognition, and sometimes our greatest purpose is found in our darkest moments. Tommy lost everything: job, family, home, identity, but he never lost the thing that defined him: the instinct to help others. The people he saved during his homeless years didn't care about his credentials or his sobriety or his housing situation. They cared that when they were dying, someone showed up. When they were forgotten by everyone else, someone remembered they were human beings worth saving. Tommy's honor was never untold. It was written in the lives he saved, the overdoses he reversed, the wounds he treated, the hope he provided. It was spoken in a language that doesn't require words, the language of service, sacrifice, and showing up when others need you most. His broken places became the places where light got in, and that light illuminated not just his own path back to purpose, but the paths of countless others who had been forgotten by society, but not by someone who understood what it meant to be broken and still choose to serve. Have you ever met someone who served others despite having every excuse to give up? Someone who found their greatest purpose in their darkest hour? Someone society overlooked, but who never overlooked others? Share their story in the comments and tell us what city you're watching from. At Honor Untold, we believe that sometimes our most powerful heroes are the ones society has written off, but who never write off the chance to help others. Subscribe to join our mission of revealing the service that happens in shadows, the heroism that wears no uniform, and the honor that asks for nothing in return. Because sometimes the greatest stories are found in the places we're afraid to look. Until next time, remember, the person you pass on the street might be guarding angels you'll never see, saving lives you'll never know about, and serving in ways that make them invisible heroes in a world that forgot to notice. Tommy, we thought we heard you'd left town. Nobody knew where you went. I've been here, Tommy said quietly. Just here. The young woman he'd rescued was stable and being loaded into the ambulance. Before the doors closed, she grabbed Tommy's hand. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for not giving up on me. Tommy nodded, unable to speak. The news story exploded across Denver. Homeless hero saves woman from river, former fire captain, living on streets. But as reporters dug deeper, they uncovered something even more remarkable than a single rescue. Officer Sarah Davis connected the dots first. She'd been tracking emergency response patterns in downtown Denver and noticed something extraordinary. Areas where Tommy conducted his nightly rounds showed a 40% reduction in overdose deaths, a 60% reduction in hypothermia cases, and dozens of anonymous 911 calls that had saved lives. Lisa Rodriguez, the social worker, finally understood why Tommy had refused housing assistance. He wasn't just surviving on the streets, he was serving on them, using his medical training to provide care to the city's most vulnerable population. He's been running a one-man emergency medical service for 3 years, she told reporters. No resources, no backup, no recognition, just a homeless man with a backpack full of medical supplies, saving lives every night. The Denver Fire Department began investigating. What they found was astounding. Tommy had been involved in 17 documented life-saving interventions over 3 years. Overdose reversals, wound care, hypothermia treatment, even talking potential suicides off bridges. He'd been a firefighter without a fire department, a paramedic without an ambulance, a guardian angel without wings. Captain Mike Johnson found Tommy under the bridge the next evening, packing his few belongings. The media attention had made his camp untenable. Too many reporters, too many curious onlookers, too much disruption to the homeless community he protected. Where will you go? Mike asked. Tommy shrugged. Find another bridge, I guess. People still need help. Or, Mike said carefully, you could come back. Tommy looked up sharply. I'm not the same person who left, Mike. I can't run into burning buildings anymore. I freeze up. I panic. I'm broken. Maybe, Mike replied. But you just saved a woman's life, using nothing but a homeless man's backpack and 20 years of training. You've been providing medical care to the city's most vulnerable population for 3 years. You think being broken makes you less valuable? The offer was unprecedented, a position with Denver Fire Department's community outreach program, working specifically with homeless populations, not fighting fires, but providing medical care and emergency response to people who fell through society's cracks. Think about it, Mike said. You could do officially what you've been doing unofficially, with resources, with backup, with support. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. What about my record? The drinking? The breakdown? The dismissal? The department makes mistakes sometimes, Mike said. Maybe it's time we fixed one. 6 months later, paramedic Thomas Mitchell walked the same downtown Denver streets he'd patrolled as Bridge Tommy. But now he carried official credentials, had radio backup, and operated with departmental support. The difference was remarkable. What had been a desperate one-man operation became a coordinated response system. The city established the street medicine program based on Tommy's informal methods, pairing medical professionals with social workers to provide care to homeless populations. Tommy led the team, training other paramedics in the unique challenges of treating people who lived outside society's safety net. Danny, the teenage runaway Tommy had saved from frostbite, was now in transitional housing and going to school. Sandra, the overdose victim, was 6 months clean and working as a peer counselor. The woman from the river accident had started a foundation supporting homeless services. But perhaps most importantly, Tommy had found a way to turn his breakdown into breakthrough. His PTSD hadn't disappeared. He still couldn't enter burning buildings, still woke up sometimes hearing screams that weren't there. But he'd learned to channel his brokenness into something constructive. I used to think being broken meant I was worthless, he told a group of first responders during a PTSD awareness training session. But broken people understand other broken people. Sometimes the best person to help someone climb out of a hole is someone who's been in that hole himself. But even living under a bridge, even forgotten by society, Tommy couldn't stop being a paramedic. It was wired into his DNA. See someone in distress, provide aid, preserve life. The difference was that now he operated without backup, without equipment, without recognition or protection. Lisa Rodriguez, a social worker with Denver's homeless outreach program, had been trying to help Tommy for months. She'd bring him food, offer housing assistance, try to connect him with veteran services. But Tommy always declined, claiming he was doing important work on the streets. Tommy, you're living under a bridge, Lisa would say. What work could be more important than taking care of yourself? What she didn't understand was that Tommy had found purpose again, not the clean, official purpose of his firefighting days, but something rawer and more desperate. He was the last line of defense for people who had no one else. Officer Sarah Davis patrolled the downtown beat and knew all the regular homeless individuals. Tommy was different from the others, quieter, more aware, somehow more present, despite his obvious struggles. She'd noticed that areas where Tommy spent time had fewer overdose deaths, fewer violent incidents, fewer emergency calls. It's like he's watching over them, she mentioned to her partner one night. Crime goes down wherever Bridge Tommy sets up camp. It was a bitter February night when 3 separate emergencies tested Tommy's limits. The first was Danny, a teenage runaway who'd been living on the streets for 2 months and was showing signs of severe frostbite. Tommy found him barely conscious in a doorway, wrapped him in emergency blankets from his backpack, and managed to get him to the hospital's emergency entrance without being seen. The second was an overdose. Sandra, a woman in her 30s who'd been clean for 6 months before relapsing. Tommy found her blue and not breathing in the 16th Street underpass. He administered Narcan, performed rescue breathing, and called 911 while continuing CPR. By the time paramedics arrived, Sandra was conscious and breathing, though she'd never know who saved her life. The third emergency changed everything. Tommy was returning to his camp around 3 a.m. when he heard the crash, metal against concrete, then the splash. A car had skidded on black ice, crashed through the barrier, and plunged into the South Platte River below the bridge. Without thinking, Tommy abandoned his cart and ran toward the river. The car was sinking fast, driver unconscious behind the wheel, water already reaching the dashboard. Tommy had perhaps 90 seconds before the vehicle completely submerged. He dove in. The water was so cold, it felt like knives against Tommy's skin. But his training kicked in. 22 years of emergency response, hundreds of water rescues, muscle memory that PTSD couldn't erase. He reached the car as water covered the driver's side window. The door was jammed, but Tommy managed to break the rear window with a rock from the riverbank. Water was flooding in, but it also equalized the pressure, allowing him to force the driver's door open from the inside. The victim was a young woman, maybe 25, unconscious and not breathing. Tommy managed to pull her from the vehicle just as it disappeared beneath the surface. Swimming to shore while performing rescue breathing was nearly impossible, but somehow he managed both. By the time he dragged her onto the bank, a crowd had gathered. Someone had called 911. Tommy worked on her for 4 minutes. Chest compressions, rescue breathing, checking for a pulse, until she suddenly coughed up river water and began breathing again. That's when the paramedics arrived. "Sir, step back, please. We'll take over," the lead paramedic said, not recognizing the soaked homeless man who had just performed a perfect water rescue and resuscitation. But his partner looked closer. Tommy? Tommy Mitchell? The game was up. Paramedic Jake Martinez had worked under Captain Mitchell for 5 years before Tommy's breakdown. He stared at the homeless man kneeling beside the rescued woman. Older, thinner, weathered by 3 years on the streets, but unmistakably his former captain. "Jesus, Tommy, what happened to you?" Jake whispered, taking over patient care while trying to process what he was seeing. The crowd was growing. Police arrived, then firefighters, then local news crews drawn by reports of a dramatic river rescue. Tommy tried to disappear back under the bridge, but Jake wasn't letting him go. "This man just saved her life," Jake announced to anyone who would listen. "Perfect water rescue, textbook resuscitation, and he's been living on the streets for 3 years." Captain Mike Johnson arrived with Engine 19, Tommy's old unit. When he saw his former captain, soaked and shivering in threadbare clothes, his eyes filled with tears. Every night, he walked Denver's darkest streets with a shopping cart and a backpack full of supplies. To most people, he looked like just another homeless man searching for cans. But Tommy Mitchell was on a different kind of mission, checking on overdose victims, treating infected wounds, and keeping watch over the city's forgotten. He'd lost everything, but he never stopped being a first responder. Welcome to Honor Untold. Before we tell this powerful story of service without recognition, healing without hope, and heroism in the darkest places, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today, and if you believe that sometimes our greatest heroes are the ones society has forgotten, hit that subscribe button and help us reveal their stories. Interstate 25 cuts through Denver like a concrete river, carrying thousands of commuters between downtown and the suburbs. Beneath its shadows, in the forgotten spaces where the city's infrastructure meets human desperation, lives a community that most people prefer not to see. Thomas Mitchell had called this space home for 3 years, not by choice, but by circumstance, a series of events that had transformed him from Captain Thomas Mitchell of Denver Fire Department Station 19 to Bridge Tommy, the homeless guy with the shopping cart. His camp was organized with military precision, a weathered tent anchored against the bridge support, a tarp stretched to create a windbreak, and everything arranged for quick evacuation if the police came through with their monthly sweeps. But what set Tommy's camp apart from others was the backpack. While other homeless individuals collected bottles and cans, Tommy's backpack contained gauze, antiseptic, blood pressure cuffs, glucose testing strips, Narcan, and a dozen other medical supplies he'd accumulated through careful scavenging and strategic relationships with sympathetic medical professionals. To the commuters racing overhead, he was invisible. To the business owners nearby, he was a problem to be solved. But to the street community of downtown Denver, Tommy was something else entirely. He was safety in human form. Every evening at sunset, Tommy would begin his rounds, not searching for recyclables, like people assumed, but conducting what he privately called wellness checks, a term from his paramedic days that still fit his current mission. His first stop was always the alley behind Mercy Hospital, where discharged patients sometimes ended up when they had nowhere else to go. Tommy would find them there, people released too early due to insurance constraints, addicts who'd been stabilized and turned out, elderly individuals with dementia who'd wandered away from care facilities. "How you feeling tonight, Maria?" he'd ask the elderly woman who'd been sleeping behind the dumpster for a week, checking her for signs of infection, dehydration, or confusion that might require immediate intervention. His second stop was the underpass at 16th Street, where the city's heroin trade created a steady stream of overdose emergencies. Tommy had saved 7 lives there in the past month alone, administering Narcan and performing rescue, breathing until paramedics arrived. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd call 911 and then disappear before his former colleagues arrived, knowing they wouldn't recognize the broken homeless man as their former captain. 3 years earlier, Captain Thomas Mitchell had been everything Denver Fire Department represented: competent, compassionate, and completely dedicated to saving lives. 22 years of service, hundreds of rescues, commendations for bravery, and the respect of everyone who worked with him. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday in March. House fire, family trapped on the second floor. Tommy led the rescue operation, personally carrying out 2 children and going back for the mother. But the structure collapsed before he could reach her. The investigation found no fault. The building's integrity had been compromised by an electrical fire that weakened support beams. Tommy had followed every protocol, made every correct decision, but knowing that didn't help when he closed his eyes and heard the woman's screams. When he woke up at 3 a.m., reliving those final moments, PTSD hit him like a delayed explosion. The nightmares, the panic attacks, the inability to enter burning buildings without freezing. He tried counseling, medication, administrative duties. Nothing worked. His marriage fell apart. His drinking escalated. Within 18 months, Captain Thomas Mitchell had lost his job, his family, his home, and his identity.